So our next panelist to speak is Nelson, representing the Commissioner of PNG Customs Services, and he will be talking to us about regulations linked to exports and import, which is basically facilitating international trade for PNG. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Nelson.
Thank you. Thank you, Fraser. May I take this time to acknowledge everyone. I'll be speaking on behalf of my Chief Commissioner. Unfortunately, I'm not able to make it to this very important conference, and I'll stand in on behalf of him. Basically, in the overall theme of the conference, strengthening sustainable business, trade and investment ties between the EU, PNG and the Pacific, the presentation will be focusing more on the regulations linked with import and export. And so I'll be, as much as possible, be brief to demonstrate this morning the regulations or legislations in relation to import and export within the context of this conference. Basically, customs strategic roles is basically the first and foremost border security and community protection, trade facilitation, and we also a revenue collecting agency for the state. While as the other two strategic roles are important, the presentation will be revolving around trade facilitation and the legislation around it because of and then align it with the theme for this morning. Sorry, if you can go three slides forward. My apologies on that. Okay, our regulatory facilitation regulatory environment for customs. I'll just speak under three categories, and then after that I'll just present a pictorial view in terms of graph and see how in the context of PNG-EU arrangement we'll see the statistics around trade for the last 11 years. So the first category that I will be talking about this morning is in relation to customs legislative procedures. The next one will be, sorry if you can fast forward, I've skipped those slides. Yes, thank you. So the second aspect of my presentation will spend some time on discussing the customs roadmap for reforms and the current roadmap between 2018 to 2022, and the third I'll just basically discuss for the interest of this conference the HIPAA protocol and the rules of origin that governs how trade is facilitated and what customs does in terms of supporting businesses who are trading and exporting and importing into the EU market. Next slide, please. So customs legislative procedures. Customs Service draws its powers from the Customs Act 1951, and that's the principal act. We also had other related legislations that we perform to ensure that we achieve our strategic roles. Under the Customs Act, and particularly Section 16 of the Act, defines that all goods imported or exported are subject to customs control. think this is a key piece of legislation, and we are aware that everything that crosses international borders is subject to any customs agents administration, whichever part of the world we are in. And for PNG customs, everything that comes in or goes out of PNG is subjected to the customs, to the control of customs. But having said that, doesn't mean that we impede too much on international trade. No. Facilitation of import and export, exported goods through procedural codes that we have within our ASICODA system. And I'll talk more about, touch a little bit of our ASICODA, the migration of ASICODA when we go to the next slide. But through the ASICODA system, we have what we call procedural codes that exporters and importers, businesses can utilize depending on different types of imports, and nature of the imports can be facilitated smoothly. The fact that every goods, whether imported or exported, is subject to customs control doesn't mean that we impede too much on international trade. We understand our responsibility, and customs is keen to support sustainability in businesses to effectively and efficiently facilitate international trade, and we can do that effectively using our system. So customs laws allows for the admission of goods through appropriate procedures, as I've just mentioned, and these procedures defines the processes through which goods are cleared while it's under customs control. So for instance, if you bring a consignment that is, or your good is under an international convention, it's appropriately cleared through a specific code. Or if it's for temporal admission, the procedure code within the systems allows for that. So the procedure codes are there to support and expedite international trade within coming into PNG or going out of PNG. Next slide, please. So in light of the changes and the globalization that is taking place, the improvements in the international trade environment, there is demand to simplify and harmonize our processes and procedures so that we expedite clearance, so customs doesn't become an impediment at the border front. So we have international obligations to international organizations such as World Trade Organization, World Customs Organizations, and there are key instruments that we implement from the World Trade Organizations. Key ones, sorry, if you can take us back to the previous slide, yes. So the key instruments under organizations such as WTO, World Trade Organization, we have the GATT regulation, valuation regulations, the Trade Facilitation Agreement. From the WCO side, we have the revised Kyoto Conventions, the safe frameworks of standards. All these key instruments drives, or we use those key instruments to improve our processes and procedures across international borders. So we expedite the facilitation of trade. We understand that if we become a barrier to trade in terms of our processes and procedures, the cost will be transferred to consumers. So as much as possible, we respond to the trading climate, trading environment in terms of simplifying the process and procedures. We also honor commitments. Currently, we have bilateral with the EU. So under the appropriate instrument, the IEPA protocol that is in place, that's how we expedite trade facilitation, either coming from EU countries or going into the EU zone. So the end result of our Modernization Initiative, this is 2018 to 2022. However, we have commenced the Modernization Initiative since 2005. And so from 2005 onward, We've undergone significant transformation in terms of the organization itself, in terms of the process and procedures, so as to enhance the facilitation of international trade, whether import or export. Just talked about the migration of the Asikuda system that we use to clear off consignments, cargo, from the wharf, from the airport. The system we've adopted, we migrated from previous modules into the newer versions, which are more effective, so as to effectively facilitate trade. So, and result is to, effectively facilitate international trade at the bottom, at the end of our modernization initiative. So, if I can just mention here, all our ports, I think 22 ports across the country currently now using the Asikuda well, so we can effectively facilitate trade. If you are doing importing or exporting, you can easily go online, access the system, it's online, and then you can trade. That's how we've come from 2005 up until today. Next slide. Just a brief on Protocol 2, I think of the IEPA, we using the, as I have stated, apart from the WTO and WCO, other international commitments and commitments to bilateral drives our work at the border in terms of improving our systems and processes, so we expedite trade, but at the same time work within the confines of all this. So in terms of rules of origin, customs is working on entrenching the rules of origin regime within our legislation. The work is currently going on, so once that is so, we will be able to effectively enhance trading across our borders. So in that space, we are an important partner. We work closely with the business industry to ensure that we do not become impediment to trade facilitation, but we support, we work closely with that to hear what the business is saying and to improve our process, our procedures. So we work partnership with the business environment, so we support them. So our regulations are not too restrictive in the sense that we limit business to progress, to flourish within PNG. The next two slides is just a graph or a picture showing imports and export volumes into and coming from the EU itself, just to show a picture of the context of our discussion. Next slide, please. So this is basically a summary to the presentation this morning. You can see the statistics is kind of fluctuating in terms of import. 1 year up, 1 year down, from 2011 up to 2016. I think it wasn't a good year in 2018, starting to pick up, but then COVID-19 hits the end of 2019, and then 2020 and 2021. We're seeing some improvement in 2022. Unfortunately, I don't have the data with me on that. So this is basically the import outlook in as far as our statistics is concerned.